I was about a day late with it, but it's hard to believe that it's been 22 years since Barry White transitioned. And it was on the 4th in '03. I remember where I was when I got the news. Um, Loved that man's music, and he resonated. He was about the rawness. He had a real energy about him. Um, Obviously, things came about that the industry tried to flip him, and he wasn't going for that, and he spoke out. He always spoke his mind. That's why he never got no Hall of Fame or all that, but he was, the people respected him. He go around the world, his music was felt. He was one of the deepest souls in terms of when he would talk. His interviews hit hard. His interviews were scared straight for you, for real, because when he talked about the industry, he didn't tap dance and sugarcoat nothing. He talked about the rawness. He talked about how he'd go in on them executives and get his bag and get his papers. He was from the streets. Barry White was so hard that even his perm was raw. Most cats had a perm on their head and it looked all smooth and flamboyant or stylish. Barry's perm was even raw. He just had he was just a cat that had a rawness about him but was real. He always said, what you have the stuff you see on TV, don't believe it. He said, what you see ain't real. He put things in perspective. He was like really right with it. He told you about his experiences. He didn't glorify being from the streets. But he had a rawness about him that between his string arrangements, his vocals, his songwriting, his production, he brought that pieces of a band. He made Love Unlimited. He brought it all together. He had a soulful strength that you could feel, but he also knew the business. He was one of the people instrumental in teaching Michael Jackson about the industry business wise, protecting your paper and your brand and your wealth and knowing who you are. He spoke up about a lot of things. He was very socially aware. He wasn't just a cat that was just making, sensuous, freaky deaky music. He had messages in music. He really did. And he demanded and got the respect of what he was about. So he was not going to back down, very opinionated, and had that spark in him. And he wasn't for a whole lot of, mumbo jumbo. But he also spoke out about what he had to deal with, and he talked about the industry. He talked about what was going on. He understood what was at stake, you know. And that says a lot about someone who knows their value, their worth, And remembering him, when you think about it, because he had an independent streak about him as independent mind. He was very, very knowledgeable cat, you know. And his godson, Chucky Booker, the musician who's an artist in his own right, and touring with Lionel Richie, etc., producer, arranger, songwriter, musician, spoke about that as well. Learned a lot from his godfather. Barry White was not someone to be taken lightly, and he talked about the dangers and everything you seeing. He talked about what is goes on and how it really happens. His music had a haunting tone to it. Marvin Gaye said that he said that's what he wanted to. He's actually thinking about asking him to produce him before he transitioned himself back in '84. But Barry White had a way of connecting. He really did. Some people have kind of downplayed it. Some called it champagne soul or disco this or that. Make no mistake about it, Barry White was a bad dude. One of the greatest, and he is missed musically. One of my all-time favorites. But his words of wisdom hit just as much as his music. They go like in syncopation for me. I never missed his interviews because that cat would get. He made you look. He made you stop, look, and listen. And his music did the same. So, I got a little funny story. Uh, when I was a kid, my mother used to make spaghetti and the strings. And I always associate the strings with Arthur Fiddler and the Boston Pops, and also associated with Barry White because he would always talk about strings. And when I would listen to anything, keyboards or music, strings, and they made me think of Barry White. But Barry White was one of the truest, one of the realest, and they don't make them like him no more. So just remembering him 22 years later on this particular time. Please like, subscribe, welcome thoughts, comments, and I do respond. Thank you. Wash your hands. Keep your mind clear. Watch out for another. Share it if you like. Stay safe, stay blessed, stay woke, stay free. I'm out one time. Peace.